Hi there, my name is Tech, and I like Marvel Rivals. Like a lot. To the point it's helping me launch my career in content creation. I love it. Please help me. Guangdong has me lost in their basement. I don't know how much I can have. Ah! As the game reaches its year anniversary, I want to reflect on what I have found to really like about the game. And, of course, look at what it's done differently compared to another titan in the hero shooter space, Overwatch. This is why I like Marvel Rivals. To head this off, this video is not going to be Overwatch bad, Marvel Rivals good, because that's disingenuous. Marvel Rivals is heavily inspired by Overwatch, and it doesn't take much to see that. Both of them have the same three core game modes of a fight for control over a point, you push a cart, or fight over control of a point, then push a cart. Both of them are 6v6 hero shooters, which break down their heroes into three different categories that value either the tankiness of the character, the ability for the character to do damage, or the ability to support the rest of your team. And it also cut from the same But one thing that I will give Marvel Rivals is it really feels, and I'm going to bring this up again later, but it really feels like a no-duh type of game. Like, I remember when the trailers first came out, and I just sort of, I watched it and I was like, oh, no duh, of course Marvel is going to do a hero shooter. Of course a franchise built on superheroes would build a hero shooter, or contract someone to do it. Another important thing to recognize is the gap in time between Marvel Rivals and Overwatch releasing. Because Overwatch released back in 2016. I can feel the gray hairs coming in as I think about it. And Marvel Rivals comes out in 2024. So there's, 8-9 years between the games releasing, which means that Marvel Rivals has a leg up on Overwatch because they can look at Overwatch and they can see what didn't work in Overwatch and why it didn't work. They can see things like the lack of variety of characters and work on that and build off of that. And so at the beginning of the game, before the characters started releasing, you had a lot more variety to the base choice of characters. There were a lot of full flyers. There were a lot of full melee characters. There were a lot of characters that had CC abilities, crowd control abilities. You had a lot of characters that could go invisible, or not a lot, but enough to recognize that. And what that allowed was that from the beginning of the game, instead of throwing a playstyle that the players weren't ready for by introducing a character later down the line, you already had characters who could do things that you had to watch out for and you had to think about. And again, this isn't a knock on Overwatch. They wanted to do Sombra, but Sombra wasn't a core character, wasn't an original character of the game. Same thing with Ana and her anti-heal. And while anti-heal is introduced with Blade, last season, there were still enough other malices that could be thrown out on characters that people were aware of malices as a thing in this game. These games both have interesting stories to tell, and both of them handle them in vastly different ways. Overwatch has a story that's more told through the game's world building than through the actual gameplay itself, while Marvel Rivals takes the opposite approach. Marvel Rivals has storytelling that's more focused on telling the story through the gameplay rather than through the world around them. And that is because of another thing that Marvel Rivals has a leg up on compared to Overwatch. It already has an established IP in Marvel. Of course, if it wasn't obvious, one of the reasons why I like Marvel Rivals is I like the Marvel IP. I'm a big Marvel fan, watched the MCU when I was growing up, watched it up to Infinity Saga pretty much religiously, and of course, since then, haven't been keeping up with it as much. But I really like the IP, and I really like the fact that NetEase was pretty much given a carte blanche, or, the go-ahead to use the majority of the Marvel cast, which means that they can pull from thousands and thousands of Marvel characters for their heroes in this game. This puts NetEase in a much easier position where they can focus on how the story unfolds within the game, unlike Overwatch, who, because Overwatch is an entirely unique IP, whenever they introduce a new character, they have to start from scratch. They have to think about who this character is, how they fit into the story, where they're from, who they're friends with, all of that. While NetEase doesn't really need to do that because they already have source material to draw from. And of course, because of this, and because they're drawing on comic book influences and all of that, this bleeds into how NetEase tells its story through not just through active storytelling by having the players play through the story, but also through drawing influence from the comic book style of telling stories. Part of what makes this interesting is how Marvel Rivals handles interpersonal relationships between the different characters. All of them have their different motivations and different ethics, but all of them agree on the basic idea of we need to deal with both Doctor Dooms. Or how do we exploit the power vacuum being created by these Doctor Dooms that are fusing the timelines together? It gives an overarching uniting purpose to the characters, and it helps allow for characters who would be naturally diametrically opposed in their own universes to interact. An example of this is Emma Frost and Scarlet Witch, who have an interaction that talks about essentially the House of M storyline from the comics, which is one where Scarlet Witch erases all mutants from existence. And Emma Frost, being a mutant herself and also leading the mutants in her own universe, is, just a little peeved about it. But the fact that, there is a larger uniting principle that is, we need to stop the Dooms, it allows for NetEase to process the story between those two characters, but also move forward with it. And focus the game into the fact that these timelines are converging, and if they stay converging, it's going to wipe them all out. And so they need to untangle the time streams and deal with Doom. And continuing with the idea of putting aside differences, it adds to the basic idea of the comic book storytelling, because throw a dart at a comic book store and you will find plenty of people upset because you threw a dart at a comic book store. But throw a hypothetical dart at a bunch of Marvel comics, and you will find that there are a lot of comics that fit this general mold. Something bad happens, and you have two different teams of superheroes that are trying to solve the problem, and perhaps that creates tension between the two groups, and they kind of get in a tiff about it, and they fight a little bit about it, but then they realize that there is a larger thing at work here, and there's a larger problem, and so they go team up together and defeat that problem. That is a part of how this game tells its story. The game has interwoven the locations in a way that makes them an active part of the story instead of just sort of the backdrop where these fights are taking place. They have cutscenes at the beginning of matches where it sort of explains the story of that location. They also have different cutscenes at the end, whether you win or lose. But if you pay attention, you may notice that no matter what happens, it allows the larger story of the season to progress. Take the Empire of Night levels as an example. Because I want to keep this somewhat short, let's focus on the Central Park levels. The Central Park level is a convergence map where the attacking team has to free Ratatoskr from a shrine, which is a sentence I would hear from a homeless guy who lives in Central Park. That aside, the defending team isn't protecting Dracula. Their goal is to use the Montessori formula to kill the vampires. The Montessori formula, very briefly, is a formula in the Darkhold that allows you to destroy vampires. So, you have two superhero teams, both of whom have the solution to the problem of Dracula. The attacking team wants to use Ratatoskr to destroy the shield around Dracula's coffin and destroy him, ending the Empire of Night, which is currently over New York City. The defending team wants to use the Montessori formula to do that. And so again, it's that idea of no matter who wins or who loses, it still progresses the story forward. But the way you win does matter, even though, again, it doesn't matter to the larger story because the larger story progresses to it. Or even some of the levels have canon endings, like the new map that's used for the new mode that came in Season 3, Resource Rumble, where if one team wins, you see the swap that happens in the story where as Jean Grey dies, she swaps places with Null, and Null gets burned up inside of the Phoenix Force. So you may be thinking to yourself that these two different ways of storytelling are rather different and rather unique of each other. But what truly makes the games unique, not just at a thematic level, but at a mechanical level, is my personal favorite mechanic, which is the team-up abilities. Team-ups in Marvel Rivals are a spin on the ideas of a hero shooter, and it really boils down to the fact that you have these characters from Marvel who have deep personal relationships with each other, and, well, because you have these characters, why not have them work together in some way? Why not have them fit together and create new abilities or new ways to interact with each other? And I think that this is really cool. I think this is an idea that really breathes a different type of strategy into the hero shooter genre, because it's no longer sort of who's in the meta in the traditional idea of a meta, but looking at the meta of a game as more of what larger composition works together, and then now with the team-ups, what team-ups work within this composition, what team-ups work within a triple strategist, what team-ups work within a triple vanguard or a triple duelist, what team-ups work within a 2-2-2 setup. It adds a different level at the base sort of hero selection stage that having a ban system doesn't add to. It adds a new level of strategy to the hero selection phase of the game that goes beyond just sort of picking those meta picks. It's looking at how different characters interact with each other. And, of course, it's a nice homage to the fact that a lot of these characters do team up, and it adds a different level of storytelling to that by shifting them around or talking about these characters and how they interact. Is this balanced? Barely. There are a lot of them that aren't really balanced, and there are a lot of them that don't make sense to a person who's just sort of reading that, Black Panther and Namor and Hulk are in a team-up. But NetEase does try and explain it with a little blurb that you can go find when you're looking up the team-ups. So, that's why I like Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals is a interesting take on the hero shooter. It takes what Overwatch started with and sort of evolves past. It adds new ideas, new concepts, and it's allowed to do all this within the confines of the larger Marvel IP, which, again, like I've been saying, is a bit of a no-duh thing. Of course you want to do this type of game with a large roster that you can pull from, and that's not a bad thing. There are some things that I don't like about this game, but of course, that's for a different video. What I like about this game is how it chooses to tell its story, not just sort of as a background to the rest of the gameplay, but actively allowing the players to feel like they are pushing the story forward. And also innovating the genre in a way that people didn't really think about before, how these characters would interact past being able to shoot at each other or being able to hit each other, and how to make it feel not just like you are one superhero in a team of superheroes, but a team of superheroes. And that's something that just I really like when it comes to this game. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, why not like? I'm trying to do this more often. I'm going to be doing this almost every Friday. So please, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what your favorite color is, I guess. Or, if you play Marvel Rivals, what you like to play main-wise. And if you do enjoy hearing me talk and you enjoy hearing me yap, feel free to check me out on Twitch. It's the exact same name, and the link is in the description. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.